With the Aam Aadmi Party are basically playing a game of Chidiya Ud Tota Ud with Hindutva.
एक भागता जा रहा है अरे इलेक्शन तो गुजरात में, आप केरला में क्यों भाग रहे हो?
If you just let people speak and don't interrupt them, they will hang themselves with their own rope. तू तो German है, तू मेरे से नीचे है. On social media, certain people will come and shout and scream and they say, oh, this is not the upper caste should leave this party doesn't care about the upper caste, let's go vote for the Congress or let's go vote for Samajwadi Party. गरियाते हैं सोशल मीडिया पे आके, बट वोट फिर भी बीजेपी को ही जाके देते हैं. ये बेइज्जती करवाने की क्या जरूरत थी? बीजेपी को तो पहले भी गालियां दे ही रहे थे, तो करते ही रहते ट्वीट, जबरदस्ती इलेक्शन में खड़े हो गए.
He was wishing Amit Shah on his birthday and he said, since Amit Shah wished me, I'm wishing him back.
Wished me, I have to wish him.
The level of political
Why can't you just wish?
Andrew Tate is entertainment, but he's cancer.
Please, Sham, do not take yourself seriously.
A very good evening. Welcome back to Swarajya. This is Sharan Setty. In this episode of Sources Say, I'm joined by a CEO of Indian origin all the way from the United States. We've had Rishi Sunak being sworn in, so it's a moment of pride for everybody. And this CEO calls himself the CEO of secularism. I'm joined by Sham Sharma. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm very, very good. It's great to be on Swarajya. It's a platform that I admire, and I admire the work that you do, Sharan, as well. So it's great to speak to you finally.
Oh, that's a big thing coming from you. Thank you so much for your compliments. It's very nice of you. And a lot of us actually look up to your content and we see it evolving step by step every day. And I'll come to that a bit later. So, how's life for you? And I heard that you're recently married. I watch a lot of your videos, but
Right.
So how's it going for you?
Yeah, no, it's good. I got married in 2021, and it's good. Married life is not really much changes other than everybody else telling you that things are going to change. So, but personally in my life, nothing really has changed for me and my wife. For me and my girlfriend, and then me and my fiance, and then now me and my wife, nothing's really changed,
Right.
except that we got a dog. And that dog is a bit of a pain in the ass for a little while. But other than that, yeah, things are good.
Have you had pets before, or is it a latest thing? Like, especially because
No, I've had pets before. When I grew up around a lot of dogs, we had a bunch of large dogs when I was a child.
okay,
And then we adopted a cat, me and my wife. We adopted a cat a couple of years ago. I think she's 5 years old now.
Mhm.
And then finally, we'd both been thinking about getting a dog for a while. So we started looking, and then we found a dog that we really, really, really liked. So we didn't want to wait. And then we finally adopted him a
Okay.
couple of months ago as well.
I'm not really a fan of cats. They can be quite. I don't think they really care about your existence. In a way, it's good. They're quite independent.
Yeah, they can be quite standoffish.
Yeah.
So they choose their moment of affection, whereas they can turn their affection on and off like a switch.
Yeah.
Whereas dogs, their affection switch is always turned on. And there's this saying about cats that if their owner dies, that they will basically within a few hours of their owner dying, they will try and eat the
Oh
owner.
my god.
Whereas the dog will be sad about the owner dying, and the cat will be like, "Achha, ye to gaya, let's finish him off."
Probably the cat wants to do some shuddhikaran or something. They care more about you. So they
Yeah,
don't want to eat up
exactly,
anything.
exactly. Like if I ever am in a deep sleep on the couch or on the bed or something, the cat will come and start nibbling at my toes. Like, is he
Yeah.
alive or can I eat him?
No, but tell us more about your story. I'm very curious because how did you enter the YouTube scene? And I think you were one of the early ones. I mean, obviously, it took a while to get that sort of attraction, and today you are where you are.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm one of the early ones, but there are quite a few people like AKTK. I think he started before me. I'm not sure, but there's a few people who came before me. But yeah, I did start in 2018, and I came into it. My story is actually quite similar to a lot of other non-left YouTubers as well. I don't know if you'll be able to relate to it, because I feel like a lot of people who make this kind of content on this side of the political aisle, they have very similar stories. So I grew up in a fairly culturally aware family. I was fortunate in that sense that both my mother and my father, they weren't overtly religious, but they were very culturally aware. They were very uh, insistent on me knowing exactly my cultural background, knowing where I come from, knowing what my cultural heritage is, and why it's important to acknowledge it, why it's important to love it, why it's important to respect it, and why it's important to preserve it. So that part was very fortunate because I happened to just be born into that family. Second part,
Right.
obviously, when my entire family is from Bihar, so I was born and raised in Patna, and my dad went to when we were living in Delhi for a certain period of time, and I went to school. My high schooling I did in Delhi, and then when I was in high school in Delhi, that's when I started to come into contact with certain teachers and certain students and certain ideas that didn't really jive with either my experience or the way or what I'd read about India and what I'd read about, the Indian culture and things like that. I would hear these my teachers make these claims that wouldn't really make sense to me, and then I'd go talk to my dad and my mom about it, and they'd be like, "Kya bol rahe tumhare teacher yaar?" And especially about like Indian history, about like Indian names and stuff like that. One of the earliest examples I remember is there was a Sikh student in my class, and he was trying to explain to the teacher. His name was Harpreet. He was trying to explain to the teacher what Harpreet means. He was saying Hari ki preet, and the teacher corrected him and said, "No, no, this is wrong. This is a Hindu interpretation of a Sikh name. The
Acha.
name actually Harpreet means jo har sabse pyar karta hai, who loves everybody. That is what Harpreet basically means." And I told that to my father, and he had a big, huge laugh about it because he didn't consider that a huge deal at that point. He just laughed it off. But then, you hear more and more
Yeah.
of this kind of obfuscation when I went to study in Delhi University. I heard much more of it because I went to Hindu college, and right across the street from Hindu college, if you're familiar with the North
Yeah.
Campus of DU at all, is St. Stephen's.
Right.
And in St. Stephen's and right next door to Hindu College, there was the Delhi School of Economics canteen. So we used to always go to the DSE canteen and eat a bunch of food, and we would get to interact with students from all over the North Campus area. And we'd often run into these, kurta wearing, khadi jhola carrying folks,
Yeah.
or people from sort of the richer strata of Delhi society, from South Delhi, Gurgaon students that would tell me all kinds of things about India, about Hindu culture, about India's, indigenous traditions that just sounded completely wrong to me. I said कि यार मैंने तो कभी ऐसे होते हुए नहीं देखा जो आप लोग describe कर रहे हो.
Correct.
So I had a lot of arguments and back and forth between those people. And when I moved overseas, I initially lived in New Zealand for a little while. Again, a lot of the same misconceptions. And finally, when I moved to the US, again, a lot of the same misconceptions. So I was like, what is going on? Like, why is basically the rest of the world have so many misconceptions about India
Yeah.
that many Indians know to not be true at all? And so I thought, well, I speak to my friends and my family about these sorts of issues. Let me try and speak to a larger audience, and maybe I can change a few people's minds, or maybe I can influence a few people. And that's basically how I started making videos on YouTube, because I was like, yeah, koi sunega nahi sunega, I don't know, but let me at least try to put my voice out there
Right.
and see what I think and push back and see what happens.
Yeah, I was discussing this with Kushal Bhaiya also last time when he was on the podcast. And I
Mm,
realized as and when I'm speaking to more and more people, this story is a shared experience. I think many of us went through the same experience, especially if you've studied in those particular few elite institutions. Like
yeah.
for me, I've studied for a majority of my life in Catholic institutions. So whether
Mm,
I'm consciously sort of detaching from that colonial education that's imparted, it still doesn't matter. You're somehow colonized in your mind. And I think that matters a lot.
yeah.
So the art of storytelling, especially with the right, I think Hindus are the masters of it, but somewhere it was lost. But today, when I watch
Mm,
a lot of your explainers, it's coming back. Even when I watched the one review on Ram Setu, I really liked how you connected all the dots, and it was explainable in a very easy way, understandable to everybody who watches it, in spite of what ideological backgrounds they come from. So where do you think
Yeah.
we've lost that as a community to tell that to tell those stories that we have effectively?
Well, I think obviously a lot of it goes to the education system because we have been told a particular story about India for the past, since basically independence and even sometime before that. And any alternative viewpoints on Indian history, on the story of the Indian civilization, have been so systematically suppressed after it, particularly after independence, that we have this beautiful, multifaceted story that we are told is the actual idea of India. And so telling that story is very easy because we've been told that story over and over and over multiple generations since Indian independence. So telling that story in a coherent, beautiful way is easy. Telling the other side of India's story, in what I believe to be the real story of the Indian civilization, which has been hidden to protect certain sentiments and to protect a certain idea of India, that story has not been told properly. And so people, जब लोग इस तरह की कहानी बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं या इस तरह का जो दूसरा इंडिया है जो हमसे छुपाया गया है उस इंडिया की कहानी बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, it's more, for the last few years at least, it's been presented more as a pushback than as a narrative on its own, because there was
Yeah,
so much information, and I would argue misinformation, about what India really is out there, that's already ingrained in the minds of many Indians, that to before you start to create your own new narrative, you have to first start to push back against the existing pre-existing narrative. So I feel like in the last 5 or 6 years जो YouTube पे नॉन राइट की डेवलपमेंट हुई है, वो सारी की सारी डेवलपमेंट बेसिकली वो
right.
पुश बैक की तरह हुई है. So it's often not
Hmm.
extremely coherent, maybe it's often not the most sophisticated criticism,
Yeah,
because pushbacks often cannot, कभी कभी होता है कि उतने sophisticated तरीके से pushback नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि you have to be very to the point and point out exactly what's wrong.
right.
However, now I think for YouTube we're entering a phase on the non-left as well, where now it's time to start setting the narrative rather than just pushing back against the narrative. So, in my opinion, I genuinely believe that starting from my channel and a lot of other channels as well on the non left, you will start to see more sophisticated content, more sophisticated storytelling, because now the time is not to push back against the old narrative. Now the time is to set the new
Right.
narrative. So, I think you'll see a change in um, the general non-left landscape on YouTube and other social media as well, and the channels that will not evolve themselves into that new landscape will get left behind, and new channels will come and take their place.
I mean, you started off initially reacting to a lot of these stereotypes in that sense. So, how has that journey been for you over the years?
It's been very interesting, um, because in my opinion I felt that there was so much that needed to be initially pushed back against, that's how my journey started. But over the last year, ever since I started basically the global channel, my mindset towards how to approach content on YouTube or on social media in general has been shifting. Whereas, like I said before, ki, what I want to do now is create uh, slightly different kind of content, which is more thought out, uh, more in depth, and it is geared towards setting a narrative rather
Right.
than reacting to a narrative. So I think the first like 2 to 3 years of my channel, uh, I did what I believed that needed to be done, to push back against certain narratives. But now you can't permanently create a channel or create any kind of a media which is just simply based around pushing back. At some
Right.
point, you have to tell the audience as well, okay, you're pushing back, but then what do you want to create on your side? कि अच्छा ठीक है तुमको ये side नहीं पसंद है, and you say कि audience look at me, that side is wrong and they're telling you something that's incorrect. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Then if we abandon that, what do we believe in? What is the correct story? So I think now is the time for me and for a lot of other YouTubers as well to start telling our side of the story in a coherent manner, in a sophisticated manner. I My personal philosophy has always been to try and have fun on this platform.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, no matter how serious the topic is, try to have fun. Because if you have fun, then I believe that my audience will also have fun. They will
Yeah.
also like watching the videos if I'm trying to have a good time. And I can't do anything too seriously. There are
Yeah.
a lot of YouTubers. I don't want to name anyone, but there are a lot of YouTubers. There are a lot of content creators, not just on YouTube, who are very self serious, who take themselves extremely
Yeah.
seriously. And my mom has ingrained in me the attitude that, please, Sham, do not take yourself seriously. Try to have a good time, try to enjoy yourself, try to poke some fun at yourself as well.
Yeah.
So that is why I always make fun of myself as a YouTube personality on
Yeah.
in my videos and on my channel as well.
And there's no harm at all. I mean, we
Because
are living in an age where Zelensky is the president. So, what do we know what
exactly,
holds for Sham Sharma in the
exactly.
future?
What do we know about anything? Yeah. And I feel like people who reach a certain platform or who reach a certain place in their lives, they shouldn't change, or they shouldn't, become self-serious, or they shouldn't start thinking that they're better than anyone else. I hate those kind of
Yeah.
people. So I always make sure to try and never become a person like that.
No, there is that assumed arrogance in journalists, and but I think it was mostly old school where you see all of these guys with a three-piece blazer and
Yeah.
a lot of these fake attitudes that they
Yeah.
sort of show.
And also, I've also seen, even in the newer crowd, there are people who start calling themselves an activist, a social media activist. And I just can't take
Yeah,
that seriously. Like, bro,
I
you
think
tweet
is it
every
okay if
now and
I
then.
call
All
you
right.
Sham?
That's not activism.
What do I
Yeah,
call
yeah,
you?
go ahead. No, Sham's good.
One thing that I relate the most as a host with you is that image that you maintain of being a very non-intrusive guy when you're talking to people,
Mm.
right? Because even if I look at maybe it's changing slightly with the newer forms of content that you're doing, because wherein it's slightly more opinionated and more researched in that sense. But when I see you talking to people, you don't interrupt them a lot, you don't meddle with their mental process of things, and basically you don't put out a lot of opinions. I mean, you do say what you want to from time to time, and I've realized that that has somehow become an exclusive thing for many people like us on YouTube. Because today when my friends look at the kind of, first of all, didn't even know that I would survive this platform, and surprisingly it's going okay. And they tell me that, I really like your shows because you don't shout over people, you still ask the questions that you need to ask, and sometimes you chill out. So
Yeah.
was this like a conscious thing for you?
It was, because um, it's very important that when you're interviewing someone, that if you agree with them or you disagree with them, doesn't really matter, that you let them say exactly what they want to say.
Yeah.
You don't start questioning them, or you don't start pushing back, or you don't start asking follow-up questions before they've completely and utterly made their point. Because you can't pretend to understand what they're trying to say unless they've finished saying what they're trying to say. So questioning them or asking a follow-up question or disagreeing with them makes no real sense if you stop them short of what they're trying to say and then ask a follow-up question. So,
Yeah.
and the other part of that is also key, you know oftentimes, if you just let people speak and don't interrupt them, they will hang themselves with their own rope. You don't even have to
Absolutely.
ask the follow-up question, and they'll just hang themselves if they're saying something wrong. So
Yeah.
it's much easier for me as someone interviewing somebody else to just let them speak. Aap bolte raho. If you're saying something wrong, the audience will pick up on it. I don't even need to ask a follow-up question.
Right. Yeah, and today the audience is particularly very, careful. They're monitoring what you're speaking. Every word of what you say is going to get measured in that sense.
Yeah.
But tell me about these fissures within the right? Because as hosts, I mean, thankfully, nobody has been able to categorize me being a part of a particular wing or whatever, which is honestly
Right.
why I don't try to overcompensate myself on social media. जितना लिखना है उतना लिखता हूँ, ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं लिखता हूँ. because I already have a platform
It's
to
probably
speak. I
smart.
express my opinions. So whatever
Yeah.
spillover audience that I get on social media, I'm very happy with that, keeping private profiles. Tell us about this process when people try to sort of arm twist you into saying that no, this is wrong, and you're this and you're that. Because I know that you've Abhijit, Kushal, everybody's faced this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't worry about it, honestly. It doesn't really bother me. I don't spend too much time thinking about it because our Kushal, Abhijit, and I, the podcast that we do, our philosophies are quite clear about what we believe. We believe in first principles, or at least I like to think that I believe in first principles, where, um, all three of us would categorize ourselves as very staunch believers in Hindutva. And if you believe in Hindutva, then you can't, as a consequence of that, believe in birth based, caste privileges,
Right.
or even the system of a birth based caste. I don't have a problem with a fluid Varna system necessarily. And I don't want to see the caste system annihilated. I want the caste system to become completely and utterly irrelevant. So I don't, what I like to equate that with is, if you look at the United States has had groups from all over the world move into it, particularly all over Europe. People have moved from all over Europe into the United States. And even within the United States, those subgroups have maintained their identity. Like there's a very strong understanding within German Americans that we're German Americans. They'll celebrate Oktoberfest, they'll dress in their lederhosen, they'll drink out of their steins. Similarly, Polish Americans they maintain a very specific identity, and they celebrate all of their traditions and all of their cultures from their old country. Italian Americans, Irish Americans, all of these people do that. But the difference is that even though they maintain their distinct identity, even though often they intermarry within that same distinct identity,
Yeah.
but you will never see discrimination by like a Italian American against a Polish American, or a Polish American against a Irish American.
Right.
जहां तक उसकी बात आती है, they're all Americans and they all see themselves as
Yeah.
white or Americans or whatever,
And it's very visible
and
with a
so
lot of these hosts as well. Like if you look at Conan O'Brien, he has the Irish
yeah.
heritage.
Yeah, and he
He's
talks
very
about
proud
how
about
he's
it.
Irish and
Yeah.
he's Irish American, very proud about it. But that doesn't mean that Conan O'Brien is going to discriminate against Jimmy Kimmel, who is of German descent. ये नहीं बोलता है कि अच्छा तू तो German है, तू मेरे से नीचे है. They don't do that, because for them,
Right.
those kind of identities, even though they like to maintain them, the importance of them in terms of a social hierarchy is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'd like the caste system to eventually go, कि ठीक है आपको अपनी caste या फिर जो भी आपकी जातीय आइडेंटिटी है, if you like that identity, if you want to be connected to that identity, I have no problem about that whatsoever. Go for it. Maintain those traditions. But जहां तक वो social hierarchy की बात आती है, that needs to be completely obliterated and become completely irrelevant.
And do you think that having such Western identities like the woke culture, for instance, I mean, a lot of the spillover effect is also affecting India and Indian universities. Now you can actually look at kids. It's so difficult because I have a lot of non-right friends because I shared the
Hmm.
same story as you because initially we never saw through these, binaries. So I continue to maintain this friendship. But today, because
Yeah.
of certain few
Which I
people,
think is a great thing. I
yeah,
think it's very important to not break your friendships over things like politics.
yeah.
I think it's very
I
important.
think it's the
A
stupidest
lot
thing
of
when
people on
people have
social
criticized me
media,
for this,
yeah.
saying that it
Hmm.
means that you have no ideological rigidity and all of that. I'm like, in spite of that, I can
Yeah.
still not demonize somebody. I can talk to them as long as they're not doing anything illegal.
Exactly. And especially if they've been your friends for a very long time and you're just going to abandon that friendship over some silly political disagreement,
Yeah.
that makes no
But
sense to
where
me.
it actually puts me in a spot is when these people sort of inherit a lot of new beliefs and they sort of impose on me. Like when it comes to pronouns, I think Abhijit would have been much more vocal about this. What has been your experience in terms of that? Because as somebody who's from India and who's seen the world over, how has identities evolved and are we becoming too sensitive about these things?
I mean, you're right in the first point that you made. You're completely correct. India is basically, particularly Indian universities, are basically importing lock, stock, and barrel the exact same political philosophies or cultural philosophies of Western countries and Western societies, which are very different from Indian society. So to import their political philosophies, their cultural philosophies, lock, stock, and barrel into India, and basically imposing them upon your own cultural philosophies, I don't think it really makes sense, because those kinds of philosophies, you know, particularly if you look at India and the West, though these two cultures and civilizations are so different from each other, that you really have to edit and alter significantly any political philosophy that you want to import into your own country. You know, for example, the kind of problem that Western countries, Western civilization has had with pluralism, India has never had that problem. So if you want to identify
Right.
as something, and if you want to, you're like, okay, gender is on a spectrum or sexuality is on a spectrum, I don't want to identify myself as just this part of the spectrum or this part of the
Yeah.
spectrum. I don't think Indian society would necessarily have that much of a problem with it,
Hmm.
because Indian society doesn't hate chaos or pluralism or differing points of view as much as, Christian society or Islamic society hates them.
Right.
Islamic society and Christian society, Abrahamic societies want clear boundaries between right and wrong, good and evil, and they want black and white.
Yeah.
That's what they're interested in. Indian society excels in the gray areas. Indian society loves gray areas.
Right.
So to bring out the same like gender ideology from West, which is so black and white, into India, which loves gray, makes no sense, because we're
Hmm.
already comfortable with gray. हमको क्यों आके gray सिखा रहे हो भाई? हमको पता है gray क्या होता है. That's the problem I have.
Since we were also speaking about your review of Ram Setu, did you manage some time to watch our biggest cultural export of Karnataka, Kantara?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I did. And I actually did a review on that movie as well. I did a joint review of Ponniyin Selvan, and I did it along with Kantara. And I love that film, yeah. I love that film particularly because it is such a unique film.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think Bollywood would make a film like that.
Right. No,
Because
I hate to
and
disagree,
it talks
but I think they will.
sorry, go ahead.
If you look at it, Yash
Well,
was
at least I feel like, have you seen a film like that from like that?
right.
And specifically, what I mean like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is Deva worship. You'll see, because it's such a specific deity or Deva, it is, or a demigod, jo bhi bolo aap usko, it is such a specific practice and such a specific Deva that is so unique to that area of coastal Karnataka. Okay, I really think that you need someone who is so deeply in love with those traditions the way Rishabh Shetty is.
Yeah.
और ऐसा कोई ना तो आदमी रहा है बॉलीवुड में, या तो no person has been has existed in Bollywood that is so rooted in that particular or any particular unique tradition from a certain area,
Right.
that they will make a film like that, or they would think that a film like that could be commercially viable. बॉलीवुड के वालों को ये लगेगा ही नहीं कि ऐसी फिल्म कमर्शियली वायबल हो सकती है.
Hmm.
Now that Kantara has set the script that yes, you can make money by making a movie like that. Maybe now Bollywood will be like, okay, let's
Yeah.
try something like this.
Yeah, because if you look at it, Bollywood only cares about money. They've produced movies, even including South
Yeah,
actors like Yash. Farhan Akhtar produced it. KGF was a huge hit and it was a great product. But
yeah,
also, there's a sense of opportunism in there because they're sensing money and they
yeah,
will invest on anybody. So I wouldn't be surprised if they invest on movies like this in the future, which I think they
yeah,
should.
yeah.
But it was
Like,
very
even if we get
interesting
such
because,
movies out of opportunism, I'm happy.
yeah, I mean, our ultimate hours together in labor criticizing Bollywood will be fruitful finally. Very interestingly, 3 4 I think this was 4 years back. I was an intern with Swarajya then, and I had met Rishabh Shetty. There was
Oh,
something in
really?
us, and which told that these guys are going to be unique. So Rishabh Shetty and a lot of these coastal Karnataka filmmakers, initially from their initial movies like Ulidavaru Kannante, and there are series of movies that they came out with. They
Mm.
struggled. They worked in parallel jobs. They worked really hard. They produced movies. I've have had friends of my own who've raised money for them last minute, and then they went on
Oh,
to become
really?
super
Wow.
hits. So I've seen the struggle up hand. And I told Rishabh Shetty that I'll be going to Manipal to pursue my master's, which is a city in Udupi, in coastal
Hmm.
Karnataka. And he said, Sharan, I think, and I was a bit of a fence sitter back then. So I
Acha.
had my, thoughts and beliefs, but I was too afraid to come out of the closet. And he said 2 years there will completely change your life. So get a Royal Enfield or whatever and go outside, explore everything, go talk to the people, watch Bhuta Kola, watch everything, and then you come back. And I can see the difference in 2 years. I'm a completely changed man.
Wow.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
So what changed for you? Like what did you experience in, was it Udupi in particular, or was it just college life that changed
No,
you?
no, college life was a part of it, but Udupi, the entire belt, basically, if you read a lot of the left's articles, it's known as the
Hmm.
communal belt of Karnataka because there's a lot of resistance. And the reason is because
Yeah.
it's on the west coast. So the Portuguese invaded from there. There were several other forces which invaded from there. Even today, there's a lot of connection. I mean, Indian Mujahideen came out of Bhatkal, which is
Yeah.
in coastal Karnataka. So obviously, people have actually lived that experience. So they're much more resilient. They're much more fearful. In Bangalore, they'll just get along with it. It'll the
Yeah.
case will be transferred to NIA and then it will go somewhere else. But here, the people actually take it upon themselves to make sure that they get their part of the justice. And if you remember that,
Wow.
I think it was a BJYM leader who got lynched last time. I think
In the
BJP
hijab
leader
case?
Praveen Nettar, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, 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 I remember.
So BJP leaders went to console their families and they were chased out. I mean, it's a BJP belt,
Wow.
and they don't care. As
Yeah.
long as you protect Hindutva, they will keep on voting for you. This is something that
Hmm.
completely fascinated me.
Wow. That's very cool. That's very cool. There are shades of Bihar there as well, because I feel like Bihar is sort of like a sleeping Hindutva giant. That yeah, it has
Okay.
voted for RJD, it has voted for the the Nitish's party JDU in the past, but I feel like there is such a strong Hindutva undercurrent in Bihar that is very palpable when you go there. Like culturally, yeah, politically, they voted for these parties because historically BJP has not had a very strong leadership in Bihar or a
Yeah.
very strong presence in Bihar. But culturally, if you look at Bihar, there are there is on the ground a very very strong resistance to sort of Islamism or Islamist aggression of any kind. Like so, there are
Right.
shades of when you tell me that story, I get reminded of Bihar a lot.
But Bihar today also they face issues with Naxalism and all of that, right? I mean, ultimately it's on the Gangetic plain, so it's not very
Yeah.
far off from UP. So you wouldn't be surprised if that sense of cultural revivalism is again coming there.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I mean, it's always been there. It's always been there. Bihar was affected very strongly by Naxal ideology because Bihar was obviously still is an extremely impoverished state. So, in a place like that, Naxal ideology was able to create a very, very strong inroads in a state like that where there is so much poverty, so many people are living below the poverty line. But the strong undercurrent of Hindutva has never left that state.
What else do we talk about? You tell me because I came unprepared.
We can talk about anything. We can talk about I think the changing political landscape as well, because
Mhm.
in my opinion, one of the things that I am seeing, that I feel like the left has still not been able to pick up on,
Revive itself.
and
Yeah.
which is why I think they've become politically, not culturally and socially, but definitely I think they've become politically irrelevant over the last decade. um, is because one thing that doesn't get talked about, when you see articles that are written from India or even from overseas about the current Indian government, they'll tell you ki this is a government for the few. ये अमीर लोगों की गवर्नमेंट है, सूट बूट की गवर्नमेंट है, अपर कास्ट की गवर्नमेंट है, and they only care about the rich upper castes. So this is a rich upper caste party that only cares about the rich upper
Yeah.
castes. This is the prevailing narrative. and they hate Muslims, and obviously all the rest of it. That's the prevailing narrative. But the ground reality is so starkly different. It's I use the word starkly because it is starkly different. Because if you look
Yeah.
at the ground reality, the BJP is a party that has outflanked the left wing from the left wing.
Yeah.
They have outflanked the left on caste discrimination, like reducing caste discrimination, because this party is the proponent of Hindutva, which believes in the annihilation of caste. So you have
Right.
already outflanked the leftists from the left. The other place where they've outflanked the leftists from the left is social outreach programs,
Absolutely.
financial inclusion programs. You look at the government's big flagship programs, they're all meant towards social inclusion, इंक्लूडिंग द जो पिछड़े हुए वर्ग हैं हमारे देश के, उनको किस तरह से पॉलिटिकल और फाइनेंशियल मेन स्ट्रीम में जोड़ना है. Most of their big flagship programs are around that. So, what the party has done very smartly, and why I continue to vote for the BJP, is because they have used Hindutva and they have used social and financial inclusion schemes to create such a wide, strong, dedicated base for
Yeah.
themselves, which comes not from the upper caste. If you look at their voting breakdown, who has voted for them, their biggest base now consists of the OBCs. OBCs vote for them, and the
Correct.
scheduled caste. Those two have become the biggest bases for the BJP. Even in the scheduled tribes
Mm.
in different parts of the country, they're making strong inroads. Like if you look at Northeast, look at how many BJP governments there are in the Northeast
Yeah.
now. Look at how many elections they're winning in the Northeast now.
Correct.
So even in the scheduled tribes, they're making big inroads. And despite being doing so many outreach programs for scheduled castes, for the OBCs, for the scheduled tribes, they're still not losing the upper caste vote.
Yeah.
On social media, certain people will come and shout and scream, and they say, "Oh, this is not the upper caste should leave this party. This party doesn't care about the upper caste. Let's go vote for the Congress, or let's go vote for Samajwadi Party." गरियाते हैं सोशल मीडिया पे आके, बट वोट फिर भी बीजेपी को ही जाके देते हैं, because they know that the all the other parties are actively hostile towards them.
Yeah.
ठीक है, कितना भी आप बीजेपी से नाराज हो लो, एट द एंड ऑफ द डे इट इज ओनली बीजेपी दैट केयर्स अबाउट यू. ऑल द अदर पार्टीज, especially if you're an upper caste,
Yeah.
they
Right.
are actively hostile towards you. So
Yeah.
please, let's not pretend that we will leave the BJP and go vote for the Samajwadi Party.
They
So
tempt
I think
cheat very often, but they have to come back to the same old nagging wife always because you know that she's loyal.
exactly, exactly, that's what it is. So and I feel like this is something that doesn't get talked about in the mainstream media. This is something that doesn't get talked about in Western media. Even
Yeah.
Indians that write about the Indian political scenario never ever really talk about this. I've seen a couple of videos, and to be fair, I've seen a couple of videos and a couple of articles from certain left-wing authors and content creators that have talked about this,
Yeah.
but they will not go deeper into why this has happened and what this means, because what this means for them is extremely inconvenient.
Right.
What this means for them is that a vast majority of Indians do not hate their culture.
Yeah.
A vast majority of Indians have a very deep seated love for the Indian civilization. Chahe tribals ho, chahe scheduled caste ho, chahe OBC ho. They care very deeply about the civilization. What is extremely inconvenient for these people is that the Ram Janmabhoomi movement was mostly a subaltern movement.
Correct.
It was led by the so-called lower castes. The bulk of the
Yeah.
car sevaks came from the so-called lower caste. These are extremely inconvenient facts for these people. And I think this is where the political discussion, and when I'm talking about producing different kinds of content,
Yeah.
I think this is where is the next step that we need to take, is explaining to the broader Indian population these very, very important and very seminal
Yeah.
political and cultural and civilizational changes that are happening with the BJP in the Indian political scenario and the
Right.
civilization in general.
No, makes a lot of sense. Even with Kantara, I was actually expecting
Hmm.
for a week that, I was kind of disappointed that nobody actually kind of took a dump on Kantara because it was very anti something. And then I see a news report which was published under an anonymous name, obviously, because they don't want to get targeted. And it
Yeah.
basically said that, they're appropriating a lot of tribal traditions with Hinduism and
Ah,
all
of
of that.
course.
And it was so textbookish that we already had the responses to it, and I don't think the people really cared about it. Which is why when
Yeah.
you talk about these New York Times and all the kind of ridiculous journalism that gets carried out, sometimes, I mean, growing up, I really admired Vajpayee ji because he was a journalist, he was a poet, he was a pet lover. I mean, he kind of ideally gives out those values who needs to be looked up to,
Yeah.
and if you're somebody who's center-right and is into this field, you obviously he's a favorite of yours. But sometimes I actually empathize with Modi ji because he simply doesn't give a hoot about any of these guys. Then आप लोग आप करते रहो मेरा काम चलता रहता है.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I don't think it really matters because they've made themselves irrelevant. And also, it's not that they're not trying to recapture the space of the opposition. Obviously, they're trying somehow
Hmm.
with the whole temple run happening. Like right now in Gujarat, you see a lot of these things happening with that
Yeah.
Gopal Italia
I mean,
whole
you see that
episode.
with you
With
see that
Lakshmi
most
Gopal.
blatantly with the Aam Aadmi Party, right? With the Aam Aadmi Party are basically playing a game of Chidiya Ud Tota Ud with Hindutva.
But I
I
don't
don't know
think
if you're
people
aware
buy
of
it.
that game. Hey? Well, that's why they don't buy it because they're playing the game of Chidiya Ud Tota Ud. They're not playing it properly because one day this guy will come and say कि मेरे को कश्मीरी हिंदुओं से बहुत प्यार है. I love Sri Ram, and he will go on the media and recite the Hanuman Chalisa. Next day he will say कि oh no, राम मंदिर नहीं बनने देंगे. मेरी दादी ने बोला था कि बाबरी की जगह पे राम मंदिर में नहीं बनने दूंगी. And then he goes in the Delhi Parliament. He says कश्मीर फाइल्स तो झूठी फिल्म है. झूठी फिल्मों के पोस्टर लगा रहे हो तुम लोग.
Right.
So the problem with Kejriwal is he's trying to play the game. He understands which way the wind is blowing. And at least I have to give him credit ki he understands which way the wind is blowing. The Congress doesn't even understand which way the wind is blowing. So Kejriwal understands which way the wind is blowing, but the problem with him is ki he doesn't know how to play the game. He's such a blatant, dishonest man ki he can't help himself but basically expose himself to the population.
Yeah.
That's his problem. We're still waiting to see a party other than the BJP that's very good at playing the game.
Right. No, and I think people genuinely associate Hindutva and a lot of their cultural beliefs to the BJP. I think they've cemented
That's
that.
correct.
Unless there is some political change after Modi. And I mean, after Modi, also, we know who is in power. So I don't think that'll actually go away from the BJP. So this whole soft Hindutva approach, maybe in cities like Delhi, it may work, which is a small state, and all of these guys get the best playback singers. They have marketing campaigns. They do dances and all of that in front of universities and malls. So it may work out. But in Gujarat, it's going horribly. But
Yeah.
but for content creators like us, I think after Rahul Gandhi, Kejriwal has become another sensation. Like there's a lot of content which can be produced. But I don't understand with Rahul Gandhi. I mean, so many rounds of reinvention. They've got the best brains, and it's not that they have really dumb advisors. They do have some really smart people
Yeah.
on board. But uh, it's like I don't know why they're trying to project him as this very macho guy at the age of 55, and there are memes comparing him to Amit Shah. अरे अमित शाह क्या किया आप लोगों को थोड़े it's not like a gym members association election or something.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not, you're not standing for Mr. Olympia. You're standing to be the prime minister of the country. And, there's a poet from my state who's one of my and my dad's favorite poet and Hindi language poet, Dinkar. He wrote,
Mhm.
जब नाश मनुष्य पर आता है पहले विवेक मर जाता है. So when your doom is near, your brain basically and your critical thinking abilities basically die, and that is what happened to the Congress party. I mean, Rahul Gandhi never really had any critical thinking abilities, but his coterie of yes men and yes women that are around him have also completely lost their um,
Yeah.
critical thinking abilities, particularly because they're just offended by the fact that nobody likes their guy. They're just permanently offended कि यार how is it possible कि हमारा macho man को कोई पसंद ही नहीं करता, nobody votes for him, nobody wants to, like, wherever he campaigns our party loses. And so they're just in this desperate free fall, vicious cycle of trying to prove that the person that they chose to head their party is the correct choice,
Yeah.
but also at the same time not being able to come to terms with the fact that the person that they chose to head the party is the wrong choice. So they just don't want to admit that they're wrong. So they'll continue to dig themselves into a deeper and deeper hole rather than admit that they were
But I
wrong
think,
and try a
in
different
the
tack.
recent past, at least in the last 6 months, there were two instances which actually gave a sense of optimism, I think, for people, at least curiosity in that sense. They were curious as to what the Congress is up to. One was the Bharat
Hmm.
Jodo Yatra, and that ended
Hmm.
up in a horrible circuit of a Forest Gump kind of a run. एक भागता जा रहा है, भागता जा रहा है, अरे इलेक्शन तो गुजरात में, आप केरला में क्यों भाग रहे हो?
Yeah.
But do you think that kind of image actually works?
I just I can't see possibly how that image works outside of like a few journalists and left wingers in Delhi, South Mumbai, South Bangalore, wherever. Outside of that, and outside of like foreign correspondents,
Yeah.
CNN, BBC, I really don't understand who gets fooled that suddenly because Rahul Gandhi can do 20 push-ups, that means he's now a good leader. You know, like there are literally thousands of people that can do 20 push-ups, but they're complete psychopaths and not qualified to be the prime minister of the country. So I don't understand what they're trying to do really here.
And even with
And
the
on the
elections,
one hand, these
AICC
people will
elections,
do, yeah,
the whole farce that was there,
yeah,
but people actually bought it. I mean, there was a sense of excitement. Everybody were seeing how much Tharoor would actually get.
yeah.
And he was the poor
Tharoor put out like
sacrificial
a such a
lamb.
sophisticated video, asking people to vote for him, but didn't get any votes.
That's really sad.
Yeah, poor guy. Now he's back on Twitter, just abusing the BJP. He's playing old game. तो ये बेइज्जती करवाने की क्या जरूरत थी? बीजेपी को तो पहले भी गालियां दे ही रहे थे, तो करते ही रहते ट्वीट, जबरदस्ती इलेक्शन में खड़े हो गए.
No, even if he has to give some backhanded compliment to say, I think he was wishing Amit Shah on his birthday. And he said, since Amit
Yeah,
Shah wished me, I'm wishing him back.
wished me. I have to wish him.
The level
Like,
of political
why can't you just
correctness.
wish? Yeah, like because he's afraid that the top brass of the party will get angry that he's wishing Amit Shah, so he qualifies. Listen, guys, he wished me, so I'm obligated to wish him. It's like somebody saying good morning to me. I can't not say good morning back.
Yeah. One
Yeah,
thing that really sort of blows me away as somebody who's interested in consuming a lot of content. Okay, wait, I'll actually come to that. But before that, I want to know, as a consumer, what content do you consume a lot in terms of podcasts and these interviews? Who are your favorites? I mean, you may not have to agree with them. Like Andrew Tate is
yeah,
entertainment,
yeah,
but he's cancer.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. I don't follow. I follow political content a decent amount, but I don't follow it. That's not all I follow. Like a lot of people think ki because you're a political YouTuber, you probably only consume political content,
Yeah.
but not really. I actually follow a lot of different content. I follow a lot of like movie-based content because I love movies. That's why I review certain movies on my channel, and so I follow a lot of like movie-based content. So I follow people like Red Letter Media. They're one of my favorite YouTube channels. They talk about like movies on their show. Chris Tuckman, Jeremy Johns, these kinds of people that review movies on their channels. I watch a lot of that. In terms of podcast, I listen to a lot of sports podcasts because I'm a big football fan, soccer, big football fan, and
Okay.
so I listen to a lot of like football based
You're not into
podcasts.
cricket a lot?
I
Because I think Kushal is.
No, I don't watch cricket at all. I never
Oh, God.
really warmed to cricket. I never liked cricket. I watched it a little bit when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and I liked it. But then I really got into football, and I found that cricket was a little bit too boring for me then.
But now
And
we
I
have the
feel the same way
T20s and
about
all of that,
American
no?
football as well. What's that?
We have a lot of these T20s and more entertaining sort of leagues now in cricket.
Yeah, T20s I can watch every now and then, but cricket in general, I just it's too much standing around. People bowl and then you stand around for 5 minutes, and then you bowl again, and then you stand around for 5 minutes, and so that standing around gets boring to me. Whereas football, it starts 90 minutes, it's over, you go home, everybody's happy. There's no
That's what
stoppages,
we cricket fans feel
and
about
this
football. There's just a lot of running around. You keep running, 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 and then finally you hit a few goals.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's over in 90 minutes. You don't have to spend the whole day watching it. And same thing I feel about American football. You play for 2 minutes and then you stand around for 5 minutes. Then you play and then you stand around. So I watch a lot of football content. I listen to a lot of football podcasts. I follow Arsenal, so I follow like Arsenal related, podcasters and stuff like that. So I consume a lot of different kinds of content. I There are certain YouTubers that like do reviews or talk about YouTube personalities or talk about
Okay.
like interesting events, and I follow some of that as well. So yeah, it's not a lot of political content that I necessarily go out of my way to follow, because
Right.
I already do so much political research on my
Mm,
channel that I want to break from it when I'm watching YouTube or when I'm watching other kinds of content.
yeah.
Even on Twitter, I follow a lot of like sports accounts, or I read a lot of about like football accounts. I don't go out of my way to read too much like political content unless I'm researching for a video.
Yeah. But that's because it perhaps over intellectualizes you a bit, and that's a problem in a way.
Yeah, and also again, I feel like certain people on social media take themselves too seriously. Like I said before, they have a very inflated sense of self-importance.
Yeah.
Like they believe that what they're doing is basically changing the world. And listen, I know there's a part of that, but I just it's very difficult for me to take those people seriously who just have a very high degree of self-importance for them just because they make a few videos or tweet out a few tweets. And also because sometimes social media can be very like life or death, and everything is on fire and everything is going to hell, and it's good to take a break from that kind of a shit show every now and then.
So what's in future for Sham Sharma show? Like, what are you planning? Do you have any plans?
I'm glad you asked that, because yes, there are. We're planning a bit of a shift, not a big shift, but a little pivot, I would say. We were planning a bit of a content pivot where, like I said in the beginning, that we're moving away from just being reactionary and reacting or pushing back to creating a narrative and presenting sort of the Hindutva side of the argument to a non-Hindutva audience as well, and telling them, look, these are the benefits or these are the pros of Hindutva, and here's what we would like you to know about it and why we would like you to turn to Hindutva. And so now is the time, I believe, that the YouTube audience and YouTube in general in India is reaching a phase of maturity
Yeah.
where they're looking for slightly more mature content. They're looking for um, explainers and
Mm,
not necessarily reaction content. And reaction content I'll always continue to do,
yeah.
but I think with my English channel as well, I want to create more English language content, like English video explainer videos,
Yeah.
that is reaching out to not just an Indian audience, but to a diaspora audience and potentially even to a foreign audience
Correct.
who want to understand what's going on in India, who want to get a alternative viewpoint than New York Times, than the BBC, than Washington Post, than the Wire, than the NDTV,
Yeah.
about what the hell's actually going on in India. So that's the next goal, is to create more mature, well researched, explainer content that is putting forward the other side of India that,
Mm,
let's say, mainstream media doesn't want to show you. So that's the goal. All the while making sure that that the Sham Sharma show never loses what its signature is.
right.
That is being tongue in cheek, not taking it too seriously, and trying to have a good time. So those three things will be with the Sham Sharma show as long as the Sham Sharma show exists.
I'm sure it's because it's crafted around your personality. So
Yeah.
I'm sure the originality of it will retain. This is
Yeah.
interesting because when I think about the BJP and why it actually fails to tell stories, you look at the Northeast, they've been in power for a very long time now, almost 10 years now. And you have
Yeah.
such amazing personalities from there. I mean, the only person that everybody largely knows of is Himanta Biswa Sarma. That's because he's from the
Yeah.
largest state there, and then he sort of has a machinery which can sort of help him prop his image up. But apart from that, there are such amazing leaders, and all of these guys are into sports. Some of them are journalists from their backgrounds, and they speak English, and
Hmm.
they're really funny as fuck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Like,
for instance, the
what's that
Nagaland,
guy from Arunachal? Yeah, who's been going viral? I think isn't he with the BJP as well?
you mean the
I
Nagaland
forgot his
education
name.
minister, the one who made fat jokes about himself?
Was he from Nagaland or was he from
He's from
Arunachal?
Nagaland, actually.
Nagaland, yeah, that minister, I think he's with the BJP,
Yeah,
right?
he's with the
I
BJP.
only watched like 2 videos of him, but I read somewhere like BJP leader or something like
Yeah,
that. So I was like, there are some interesting personalities out there, and his Hindi is bloody better than mine, so much better than mine.
that's
Like
what
his
surprised me.
Hindi is like 100 times better than what I can speak. So yeah,
And especially
when
because
you tell when you tell people from the northeast to learn Hindi, तो यार मेरे को शर्म आ जाती है.
बिल्कुल, and especially because I come from the south where this language divide is an existing divide since centuries now, and even today a
Yeah,
lot of people with that stop Hindi imposition kind of happens here. I mean,
yeah,
it'll be too problematic for me to even talk about this because it's so insensitive right now.
right.
And you see people from the northeast who are farly distant from Hindi as a language themselves taking the
Hmm.
effort to actually learn it, and I think that's great. Because when people
Yeah,
talk about having a choice of learning their own language, I'm like, why don't you learn two? Because I think as
exactly.
Indians as a community, we take pride in knowing multiple languages. Like at least you
I mean,
understand
even
it
in
if you.
the, I think in the education policy as well, Modi has said that we should teach southern languages in Uttar Pradesh,
Yeah,
teach Kannada in Uttar Pradesh, teach Tamil in Bihar, and then teach Hindi in Tamil Nadu as well. Let everybody learn each other's languages. Give people that option. I'm not saying make it like compulsory, but
yeah,
give everybody the option. Tell people कि हमारे languages में, हमारे schools में, पंजाब में या उत्तर प्रदेश में या मेरठ में जहाँ पे भी we are offering, आप आ जाओ, learn Tamil, learn Kannada,
right.
learn Assamese, learn Bengali.
No, but I think it's
We should
mutual
be encouraging these things.
disdain towards each other. Like you look at that whole north and south divide and the debate that happens. It's
Hmm.
quite old. But if I need to address it personally, I've seen that because it's not just the South Indians who
Yeah.
hate Northeast for coming and invading our IT parks and all of that. But even people, when you travel to the north, you are generally called a Madrasi. Maybe they don't mean to offend you, but yeah,
Yeah.
there is a sense of condescension when they call that. Like I remember,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was very conscious. So I wanted my first book to be in Kannada because it's a very beautiful language, and in English we always speak to kabhi bhi kar sakte. Hai.
Hmm.
So I published a book earlier this year, and I went and gave it to one of my friends just as a token. I mean, he can't read Kannada, and he's like, "Bhai, ye kya jalebi diya hai तूने?" Because looking at the letters, I'm like, "Yeah,
Jalebi diya. Yeah.
jalebi थोड़ी ना है." Then the other guy is saying, "नहीं नहीं,
Yeah.
उड़िया जलेबी जैसा है."
Odia is the most jalebi, I think, looking for sure.
All the Odias
But
will
it's
be
such a
very angry
pretty
at you.
script. I feel like Odia is such a beautiful looking script.
It is.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I think those things, and the reason why I like Hindutva, the reason why I like the BJP is because they're trying to remove that mindset
Yeah.
between people, and they're ingraining this idea within people that listen, we face some very serious challenges to our civilizational heritage, and aap ya to you have the option to either do caste, either do language, and remain within your little tight knit group, or get out of your tight knit group, break past these regional language and caste barriers, and create a super identity of your civilization,
Right.
which is your civilizational identity. That needs to be number one. उसके बाद आप अपना कास्ट रख सकते हो, उसका लैंग्वेज रीजन रख सकते हो. नंबर वन हमेशा सिविलाइजेशन होना चाहिए, वरना योर सिविलाइजेशन इज अंडर थ्रेट. And that is what Hindutva and I believe the BJP is trying to do, which is why, again, I support both of these.
As a parting message, what would your advice to budding content creators be?
I would just say try to be authentic, try not to be somebody who you're not, try to be yourself. And a lot of people will come out and say, Arey, yeah, but my personality is very boring. I think my personality is very boring. Will people like that boring personality? He said, yes, they will. As long as people don't want everybody to be, Govinda. They're not looking for Govinda on YouTube. They are looking for authenticity.
Right.
They are looking for people who they can look at and think that, acha, ye banda authentic hai. Ye banda, at least I would trust this man or woman to not lie to me at least.
Yeah.
As long as I'm getting that authenticity, I will watch him. There are many YouTubers that I watch that are not funny people. They'll talk in a very monotone, serious voice, but they're presenting content in a way that is interesting,
Hmm.
that it's their personality, and they're authentic. So
Right.
I can look at them and I can think, कि अच्छा ये बंदा मेरे से झूठ नहीं बोलेगा. He's not going to lie to me and he's not going to pretend to be something he's not. So one thing I would say: be authentic. Be willing to change your mind. Like I have had my mind changed about tons of things ever since I've been on YouTube. So be willing to change your mind. Be willing to um, be patient,
Mm.
because people often think, that YouTube pe jao, video banao, and you'll be a YouTuber, famous YouTuber. And I've been on YouTube 4 years. I'm not a famous YouTuber. So I will say, be patient. um, do the work, keep doing the work. Remember that content creation on social media, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You will see many people who have gained millions of followers in just a year, but those are
Yeah.
anomalies. Trust me, those are anomalies. It takes a while. So be prepared to be patient, be prepared to put in the work, be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. Be willing to change your mind. And most importantly, try to have fun, because if you won't have fun, you will quit after a year. So if you want to be there for the long haul, if you want to be successful, make sure that you're trying to have fun. Whatever your idea of fun is,
Right.
make sure that you're trying to have fun.
Well, I've had a lot of fun talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Again, as I said before, I admire a lot of the work that you do, a lot of the interviews that you conduct, and I've been a big fan of Swarajya for a long time now.
Thank you so much. It's very kind coming from you. And obviously, I consume a lot of your content, and I think it brightens up anybody's day because you have this unique ability. And when I mean you, not just you, the whole circle that you have, you take the most gloomiest of things and you make it fun and understandable, and you share different perspectives, which is why I think
Yeah.
it's also educational and fun at the same time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll make sure to convey a message to Abhijit and Kushal as well. And that's been our goal ever since we started the show. So I'm very happy that we're able to translate it to our audience.
Yeah, I'm really glad, and I think we should all have a conversation once. It'll be really fun. We'll plan that soon.
Definitely. Yeah. Just tell us the day and time, and we'll make it happen.
Anji. Thank you, and viewers, please do let us know what you thought about this in the comment section below. Until next time, this is your host Sharan signing off.